make it through, so that's really risky. And if you finish second in the group, you're going to play the winner of another group, so that's a harder route to the final as well.
Yeah, you would literally be taking one for the team, and here it's hard to ask two world-class players to kind of fight their path through, fight their way through. Tomorrow it will be whoever loses this match on the line with their last life, and yeah, it's going to be all guns blazing once the games do begin.
Exactly. They cannot afford to think about that right now. They have to focus on the two games that are directly in front of them. What are they going to do? Do we think there's enough, there's enough respect and friendliness and team play here that we might get some quick draws and we're just going to Armageddon? Or are we absolutely slogging it out and giving everything to qualify? How do we feel about that?
Well, I think Hikaru Nakamura, he knows the speed of his opponent, and although he's a speed demon himself, he might want to avoid the Armageddon. Hikaru's track record with Armageddons is actually a bit up and down in the last few years. Armageddon adds that random factor, and he knows how quick Alireza is on the mouse. I think he'll want to avoid that scenario.
All right, well, it sounds like, Tanya, we're probably in a position where Hikaru wants to fight and wants to win in regulation time here. How are we feeling?
Every single move, every single game, the two rapid before the Armageddon, it's going to be a fight. And I think it's a complete toss who takes this one. I mean, two of these three were in the favorites when in our studio we've got the punditry going on. Magnus Carlsen, Hikaru Nakamura, and Alireza Firouzja as the big favorites to take that $250,000 top prize. I mean, Hikaru said it in his interview, right? He almost wants to face Alireza, so that at least one of the Falcons is through to the quarterfinals.
And this is part of the high-risk, high-reward approach of the way the groups are structured. David, you were there. I saw Team Liquid and Falcons having both teammates in the same group, and my eyes went as wide as dinner plates. I went, why would you do this? You actually want to be on opposite side. You are really front-loading a lot of the risk. But the upside is that if in either of those groups, both Liquid players go through or both Falcons players go through, they go through in first and second and end up on the opposite side of the brackets. There's no team kill until the grand final if they make it through the groups.
Exactly. As you mentioned, I was there when the groups were being chosen, and I just thought it was the biggest blunder of the century when Magnus sent Alireza to Hikaru's group, because in revenge, in return, of course Hikaru was going to send Fabiano to his own, but yeah, these teammates and the paths that they could make it through, it could be a masterstroke. Maybe Magnus was capable of seeing that far into the future, so many steps ahead. We wouldn't be surprised by that.
Yeah, and right now, these two are trying to look ahead into the future. I mean, so much on this match, right? Both want to book that quarterfinal spot. Both absolute speed demons with a bunch of speed chess championships under their wing right now. When it comes to mouse skills, both these players, Hikaru and Alireza, second to none. I think it's going to be so much about those time scrambles. We're going to have some dirty flagging in this one.
Dirty flagging. Are we going to see that? Let's find out. We start positionally with 1d4. So let's get cracking into game number one. It's the battle of the teammates, Team Falcons. Let's see what they can do.
Yeah, a small surprise from Alireza Firouzja this early. Firstly, serving with the d-pawn. He's not a d4 kind of expert necessarily. He rarely employs this move on move one, and this little pawn push, pawn to g3, gives black a bunch of options. Maybe aiming to transpose to the Catalan defense, but this one, yeah, we'll see how Hikaru reacts. He counters in the center immediately.
I mean, Hikaru Nakamura has 9 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock, and I'm used to him being 25 moves deep at this point. So that to me tells me how much he's being made to think instantly.
I mean, this is not only a generational clash, it's also a clash of styles between these two players. And I love that there's already a face-off in the center. Hikaru took his time to go in with that. Early moves, it's kind of good if you're not super familiar, something you were not expecting, to just sort of find your rhythm, warm up into the game. There's a trade that just happened right now, and I wonder if White will pick up with the knight. For Alireza, two decisions to be made here. You could go knight takes pawn, you could go queen takes pawn, both with its own pros and cons.
I love the facial expression from Hikaru as well. It's almost saying, look, I know this position's fine, but what's your game plan here? What have you got in store? I was not expecting this from you. So I love that Firouzja's clearly kept something up his sleeve. Regardless of the results of this game, the elements of surprise has been achieved here, is what it looks like.
And Hikaru maybe waiting for that decision from Alireza. He'll be waiting a bit longer because Alireza castled his king instead, now pushing a pawn. That d4 pawn that black is up currently, it's not running away. So just delaying the decision, a very typical kind of action by these top players.
Impossible to defend it, so why not improve your pieces slowly before capturing? He might even bring his bishop to b2 and argue, I might pick that central pawn up with my bishop on the longest diagonal. Some very creative play here by Alireza in the early stages of the game. Safe to say we're out of any opening preparation. The players are on their own now.
Yep, both freestyling, both going their own way, and multiple options here. It looks like black probably is likely to develop the dark squared bishop, get castled, attend to all of the kind of first steps of the opening. Nope, he brings the knight out instead, Hikaru Nakamura. Now we finally see that pawn drop off, and we will likely see a trade of knights on someone's terms in the next few moves. This position resembles a Grunfeld defense with colors reversed, where it's all about hyper-modern chess. That means bishops on the longest diagonals, fianchettos, and central tension from afar.
Yeah, being very, very happy, of course, to deal with that from afar. I think those being the key words, because white doesn't have a pawn in the center of the board right now. And that's completely fine. It's becoming more and more prevalent in modern chess for that to be okay and deferred until later in the game.
Absolutely. Like you said, right now is the key word there, right? Because those pawn moves, those pawn advances will be set up. Either we'll see the e-pawn move forward or the c-pawn move forward.
Right.
And the idea is not only to get a central break in, but you want to activate your light square bishop. You want to break that wall that d5 Hikaru Nakamura has set up right now. So definitely those plans are on the radar. The big question here is, if we do get into those time scrambles, David, what do you think? Who out of these two players is faster on the mass?
I think Alireza. I know Hikaru has the pedigree, he's got years of experience, but Alireza is so much younger, 15 years younger. He's been Bullet World Champion now a few times. Hikaru didn't even turn up to the last Bullet World Championship because maybe fearing Alireza's speed. They've had some big matches there over the last few years. It's very close though. It's so hard to call. I think it depends on the position. If it's slower, more strategic, an endgame, maybe Hikaru will be faster. If it's crazy position, Alireza, his speed will tell.
But also, when you get great rivalries in any sport, even if there is a passing of the torch moment, there is a time period where it almost comes down to what they had for breakfast that day. Even if Firouzja is on the rise, Hikaru on his day could be a 2-0, could be a 2-0 the other way. We don't know. And the fact that they're just that capable and that on top of their game, that they can beat each other almost on a dime, absolutely incredible.
Exactly. Just two warriors, two legendary players. Alireza has already kind of asserted that status despite his young years here. And the consistency from both is impressive at quick formats. In the meantime, Hikaru, the first to make a bit of a face here, develops his bishop, getting ready to castle. Black with the center, but white with the slight lead in piece development.
Both Hikaru and Alireza, they're big stage players. The best comes out in them under pressure. They thrive in the chaos, and that's really the biggest asset an athlete can have. And right now, well, what are the assets in the position? You've got these two beautiful bishops on the long diagonal. If you are Alireza Firouzja, you're again constantly trying to eye either the c4 pawn push or maybe plant your knight on the dark squares. Meanwhile, for Hikaru, he's still got to get his development complete. He's got to take that time out to get the king to safety. I'm liking what Alireza's created here.
Yeah, it feels like this is his opportunity, though, this next move before the black king castles to safety, that he needs to strike, whether it's the white A pawn to try and create some pressure on the queen side, whether it's preparing the white C pawn to move forward, or the white knight jumping to hit black's light squared bishop. It feels like this is the moment to change the pace, accelerate the pressure, create some small threats that might slow Hikaru down.
And I also want to point out, while these two players, of course, they are on Team Falcon right now, but they're also rivals. They push each other to the limit here, So playing against each other, this match means a lot to them because they've had these epic finals. They've had these epic clashes. And I think this is another leaf in that big rivalry despite their age gap, which is a rivalry that continues to unfold.
It's like watching Nadal and Federer on the same team. You look at that and you go, on paper, that's just unfair. And that's what Team Falcons have successfully done here. There's a reason why both of these players are in our top bracket. They are some of our favorites to win the entire event, and it's no coincidence. They've proven this time and time again, despite the fact that Alireza is so young. He's been able to do it multiple times at his age. Incredible.
And I love what Team Falcon's done, right? Because they picked up Hikaru as their first player, and it was in March this year that they signed on Alireza, immediately sort of building this rivalry against Team Liquid, which had Magnus and Fabi.
Absolutely.
So this is the big immediate clash. This is the big storyline at the Esports World Cup. Team Falcons versus Team Liquid.
Yeah, you only inspire your rivals to try and one-up you here. You only push them, inspire them to greater heights, and yeah, this team rivalry is going to be fascinating.
And look, already, if you're the team bosses here, you're thinking, well, actually, Hikaru is meeting Alireza in the winners match in their group. Magnus and Fabi will not be. So from a smugness perspective, Team Falcons must be thinking they've drawn first blood. It's still possible, of course, that all 4 of their players make it through to the playoffs, and it is symbolic at the end of the day, but they are currently more on form. I mean, the results speak for themselves there, so it'll be very interesting to see how they fare going into tomorrow as well.
Yeah, it's these two who are slightly closer to those quarterfinals. Meanwhile, there was a trade, a knight for bishop, and a couple of pawns disappeared, so still level material. Here, Hikaru, very, very principled play from him. He's trying to get the queens off. White has a passed pawn on b3, but that is also an isolated pawn, a potential target. White's light squared bishop, surprisingly ineffective right now. It feels like it's dead level, but it's the type of position that could still turn in either side's favor if some inaccuracies creep in. Alireza, it's not his type of position. That's the one thing I'm going to say. It doesn't feel like he's getting at the enemy king. He's not keeping so many pieces on the board that he can hope to whip up an attack later. It feels like Hikaru in his comfort zone.
Do we think that it's psychological then, maybe, where Alireza surprised Hikaru with the choice of opening, but Hikaru's now sitting there going, okay, cool, now what?
It just shows Hikaru's experience at handling those surprises, just how good he is at it, and that's the response that he got. He kept the pressure on the clock, didn't really spend too much time there, and what he's gotten out of the opening, going into this middle game, everything under control. You know, the b3 pawn, it's a target. He takes control of the only open line, well, the C line with the 2 rooks right there, not offering any trade. The big break that Alireza has is moving the e-pawn forward, but that would just invite a lot of trades in the position. Hikaru would be happy with that. I think starting with the black pieces, if this game ends in a draw, it would be once again just a draw on Hikaru's terms.
I do worry for Firouzja here. He needs to pull the brakes soon. He needs to maybe trade off. Okay, there we go. He does blow the center open. I was going to say bishop for knight trade was available as well, but he's 2.5 minutes down on the clock. He's facing a bit of pressure on the board. Hikaru now looks very interested in what's just happened. This looks like a pawn sacrifice. After a bunch of trades on this e4 square the pawn's just landed. The black queen can snack on the pawn on b3. Some calculation needed. We'll see another trade in a moment. And it's up to Hikaru to try and apply some pressure. He's in the driver's seat right now.
He really is, and that's the b3 pawn you're talking about. But like you said, there are checkmating ideas on the back rank, also the 10 to g7 spot. So there might be some attacking concepts that Alireza is trying to build. If queen takes pawn was to happen on the board, I'm trying to understand if there's a quick knockout blow, because again, spidey senses tingling here.
Yeah, maybe we can show it. I think there's a bit of a trap in the air, or at least something that Alireza wants to bait Hikaru into. He's hoping that Hikaru grab that pawn on b3. Nope, Hikaru kicks the bishop back first. He delays capturing that pawn. Just to backtrack one move, quick action replay. If Hikaru had played the most obvious move in the position and taken this pawn off the board, there would have been a cool double attack. Here, Firouzja would have sacrificed his bishop. A brilliant, luring sacrifice here. The black king steps forward and a double attack, hitting the king, hitting the bishop. And when the dust settles, it would have been at least an equal position for white. In the meantime, though, pawn stepping forward, Hikaru has gone a pawn up in a safe manner, and he's the one trying to press the advantage.
No more bishop takes pawn once that bishop has retreated, which means now Alireza has to prove the compensation. He first brings the rook to the party, gets it to the central line with a tempo, attacks the bishop. It feels like a pawn, and suddenly momentum is shifted, right? With the world number 2 for Hikaru, it feels like a game for 2 results.
Body language has shifted as well. Hikaru was looking very chilled, very composed, leaned back. He knew probably it's just a level position, probably it's a draw. Now he's won a pawn, suddenly he's much more interested. Still some problems for black though, coordination, back rank problems. The black king kind of trapped behind its own pawns, so tactics maybe not working in his favor, but it is Hikaru the only one who can really realistically win this game.
And looking at the way the pieces were exchanged as well, there were ways in which you could have opposite colored bishops here. And I know we've spoken about with major pieces still on the board, that's really dangerous, but ensuring that the dark squared bishops are the minor pieces still here, I feel like that's an attempt to keep the position a little bit more sharp, to engineer situations where your opponent just has that little bit more opportunity to make a mistake, where just a little bit more calculation is required on every move to make sure that there isn't a trap of some description.
Yeah, there's still plenty of flavor here. I'm not sure how happy either side are. Watch out, there are still some tricks in the air. If you take the black pawn on e5, the black bishop will slide over to f6 with a bit of a skewer, hitting the white queen, hitting the rook in the corner. But yeah, this is definitely a design by Hikaru to try and win. It's still 4 pawns versus 3. The fact they're on the same side is maybe what will hinder him winning this game. But Firouzja, in the meantime, going active. That's a great kind of trait by all the top players. They defend actively.
This is going to be quite spicy because Alireza is going in for the attack. You know, the rook coming in, another rook could join in on the 7th rank, targeting the black pawns in front of the king. Your h4 idea, you know, the alpha 0 way always on the cards as well. And Hikaru, they're almost giving up a tempo. He moves the bishop 1 step and then another step back to defend. The e5 pawn now can be picked up because the skewer you earlier lined up isn't possible anymore. So queen takes pawn would, in fact, neutralize that material deficit.
Yeah, not just giving up the pawn, but giving up his winning chances. It feels like Hikaru, maybe a bit of panic there from him losing a tempo with that bishop. Now it's Hikaru who wants to pull the brakes. Maybe he's going to try and trade off the queens, trade off rooks in some scenarios. It is 3 pawns versus 3 pawns, very symmetrical. Looks like it's heading towards a draw, but missed opportunity, or at least a half chance there for Hikaru, squandering that pawn advantage.
It's also this opportunity that you just make your opponent sweat a little bit more. Even if Alireza has that counterplay against the pawn sacrifice, you make him sort of fight for it because there's another game coming up, right? That's how you build pressure, not just move by move, but game by game, till your opponent cracks. So I think there was something for Hikaru there, but the bishop retreat twice, that tells the full story of the miss there. Like you said, rook's trade being offered right now with some checks on the 1st rank.
Yep.
Eventually coming in if white's not careful.
When you look at the relative activity of the pieces as well, like previously it felt like Hikaru had a little bit more harmony. The rooks were on the same file before Alireza could get his own into a decent position. But now when I compare the position back then to how it is now, there are significantly fewer imbalances in the position. I feel like Firouzja has had some time to get his house in order. The most active pieces have been traded off. We've got a little bit more harmony in white's position, and it's now difficult to see where the breakthrough is coming.
Yeah, the problem is for either side here that you're not going to win unless you can land a tactical blow. There are no pass pawn potential. Queen trade, draw. Rook trade, draw. Bishops off, likely draw. And here we go. We see the look on Hikaru's face. This game is going to be guided towards safety any moment and a draw by agreement.
All right, so the first game ends in peace. 0.5 apiece going into game number 2. There was a little bit of a surprise though, because Alireza Firouzja did break out an opening that Hikaru might not have expected, but they both navigate the middle game. Hikaru showing his experience in being able to handle that under pressure, and at the end of the day, a relatively peaceful conclusion to game number 1.
Hikaru handled it really well, and going into this final 10+0 game, you know, Hikaru's got to be pleased with the way things went. I think the draw was completely on his terms, starting with the black piecings, being the one with the edge, with the advantage pushing through. He never really had too much, even the extra pawn. Alireza with that advantage of compensation, of initiative, things under control, but I think Hikaru starting with the white pieces, he could very much go all out in the next one.
Does Hikaru respond with a surprise of his own? Like, he was a little bit... We saw his facial expression in game 1. Has he got a surprise with white, David?
I think he does, Hikaru Nakamura. Nice to see smiles from the fans out there, by the way. Also, I should mention in the action replay, we saw 98% accuracy from both sides. In order to beat the top players, though, you do need a surprise. You need a bit something a bit spicy. Often that means compromising your own accuracy in your quest to bamboozle the opponent.
Yep.
And with white, Hikaru, I think this is his chance, or at least he sees it that way. Whether it's a direct surprise or a surprise a bit later in the game, he's going to try and land the first blow.
I have to say, that was so in sync when the referees walked on. I thought they were the backing dancers for a second. That was beautiful, stride for stride. But no, the players getting ready now for game number 2, checking that the issues At the start of the match, no longer persist. Everything looks good. We're about to get started. Game number 2. Hikaru with the white pieces. I really want there to be some sort of surprise here because I would love to see how Alireza Firouzja responds in the equivalent position to what he just put Hikaru Nakamura through.
And what's really interesting about Alireza's brand of chess is that he's one of the fastest when he's got little time on the clock, but very often he's also behind on the clock a lot. You know, he's the one who comes in with that time deficit, uses up those extra minutes at the start. So if Hikaru is able to get that opening surprise, we might see that being played out.
Right.
And against a player like Hikaru, you really don't want to be the one who's behind on the clock.
That's true. You're faster, but if you're faster out of necessity and not by choice, to what extent? It's obviously a useful skill, but against someone like Hikaru, if he's putting you under time pressure, you never want that, right? So what we have here, we've got the French being busted out. I'm not certain anyone's in surprise territory just yet.
Yeah, it's actually Alireza Firouzja reverting to his childhood favorite, the Caro-Kann defense. And although it is a French pawn structure now, the pawn's blocked in the center, Hikaru baiting Alireza into breaking that center. It's a temporary pawn sacrifice. Black did take the pawn on c4. We'll see that material balance re-established, and this is just super trendy stuff. I think Hikaru may be landing the first small surprise going for this variation, 30 seconds up on the clock, but Alireza still, he's seen this before. He's been playing it since youth.
So crucially, if we're very, very used to these French-style pawn structures, realistically, there's not going to be any quick liquidation. There's not going to be any instance of a player going, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that. I didn't realize," or how to necessarily play this out. The players will already have a good feeling of where the best squares for their pieces are likely to be, which means early game, early middle game mistakes, rather unlikely in this game.
Or maybe after this last move, we might be seeing those mistakes happen, because that's not an easy move to respond to if you haven't studied this line with black, at least recently. You know, h4, h5 coming in. There's a beautiful post on d6 that the white knight could eventually get on. Black, meanwhile, trying to get his own knight to f5 to stop that idea. This is an imbalanced game. This is what we want. I think this is where also both these players really excel at. So I'm expecting it to be even more exciting. Hikaru Nakamura also setting up a beautiful square for his queen to land on g4.
Yeah, despite the fact that we've already had 11 moves now, it doesn't feel like Hikaru is winging it. He's not just playing it on the fly in this clash between the Falcons. He knows exactly what he's doing. This position, I believe, has been studied before. It's been played before. Even we see a knight trade. Just the speed. Hikaru, he's only spent 50 seconds to make some big decisions. Now it is a pure French pawn structure with the blockages in the center. It's a check. The white king will happily move, though. This is fine when the center is blocked. And I do fear for the black king.
Speaking of the black king, it's Hikaru who goes the bon clave, gets the king on e2. You know, it is his favorite, opening the favorite square. It does arrive. You know, you're mentioning the French defense. Now, the biggest problem in the French structure for black is the light squared bishop, which is stuck behind his own pawns. Now, with that off the board, that is why it's absolutely level, because the problem child is not there anymore.
So once we get into, I guess there are still some reservations about white wanting, for example, to bolster the h-pawn push with like f4, f5, something like that. You want to get the rooks behind it and ideally get the queens off the board as well, because otherwise the king's looking pretty breezy in the center. This isn't something that you can accomplish in the next 3 to 4 moves. It's more long-term strategic thinking.
Yep.
Absolutely. And speaking of strategic thinking, David, you know, we spoke about the bishops off the board. Great news for black. Another French concept, break to get to that king, right? F6, an idea that we often see. And that's definitely on Alireza's radar.
Yeah, I mentioned that I feared for the black king. Actually, it is the white king this time that I don't like the placement of. I think Hikaru maybe missed a trick. He could have slid his king to the f1 square, slid it even further across to safety, and then gone on the attack with his pawns, thrown the white pawns forward. Black king does feel like it doesn't have too many defenders around it, but meanwhile, Hikaru occupying the c-file, that hints that he might be happy with some trades. The c-file feels like the battleground for all the rooks. Maybe we'll see all the rooks disappear. Long term, the pawn structure looks very balanced. The black queen comes out instead. And this one, it feels like a 50-50. Hikaru with a small time advantage, though. I think he would have taken this position if you'd offered it to him before the game began.
I wonder who would be happier out of the two if this match does go down to the wire. It goes to an Armageddon. I know the fans would love it. We would love it in the studio.
Oh, it'd be great.
And who does that favor more out of Alireza and Hikaru?
Oh, that is a great question. I feel like, look, these are the two players capable of bidding 2 minutes and still finding a way to complete the game. But obviously you don't want to do that in an Armageddon game. Wouldn't that be something if we had the Armageddon game and we got to see whether Nakamura and Firouzja are happy to bid lower than everyone else? Wouldn't that be something to watch?
How low can you go for those black pieces for trying to fight for the draw?
Right.
And speaking to the point of the C-file trades, you know, if the majors are off the board, suddenly you're very happy with your decision of keeping the king in the center. It turns out to be the best square in the position. So Alireza trying not to rush with the decision of getting the rook to C8, but it might be time because Hikaru is setting up an F5, F6 pawn advance.
Yeah, he's just hinting at least to Alireza that he might go on the attack. The white pawn's already very far advanced. And Alireza doesn't like his cramped positions. Despite the fact there have been some piece trades, his pieces feel free at the moment. Long term, the white pawns are more likely to push forward. So I still feel that Hikaru may be the more comfortable of the two, at least his position easier to handle. And again, that's reflected in the clock. Hikaru definitely wants to stay ahead of his young rival, his young teammate here.
It certainly feels like the best way I would describe it is that Firouzja feels like he's playing a little bit more reactively to what Hikaru wants to do, or he's waiting for the timing that Hikaru can dictate to determine the course of the game. And Hikaru here keeping Alireza guessing a little bit. I know I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure I'd want to push F5 until the queens are off the board. I'd be getting a little bit worried about that. These guys seem perfectly happy about it. Maybe we will see that, and maybe that's part of the reason why Alireza has gone into the tank a little bit.
And its strat is always stronger than the execution, right? So just the idea that F5 is always available for white is something that Alireza will have to think about and calculate every single move of the way. I think the problem for Alireza here with black and why he keeps burning the clock is that it's just not his kind of position, right? Those tactics, those tricks, that chaos, it doesn't exist. It's sort of a strategic fight where black's on the defense. And that's a bit of an Alireza nightmare.
Let me ask you a question, and maybe the answer to this is it's not possible. Is there anything that can be done conceptually? Like if you had 3 or 4 free moves and you got to play around with where the pieces are, what can turn this into a position that he would love?
For Alireza, first he needs active pieces. I'm looking at a few of them here. The Black Knight has nowhere to jump forward to. I think he would love this position if the final set of rooks also disappeared. And just because for now, White Rook is perfect as a defender, but also controlling the only open file. If Alireza can jump forward with his knight somewhere, trade off a set of rooks, long-term Black should be happy. The White Bishop is actually a very bad piece in these types of endgames, stuck behind its own pawns. So again, not necessarily his type of position to go for endgames, but this is a good start. The Black Knight reroutes itself. Given 2 more moves, it might jump forward to c6, then b4 with a fork. Looks like a good start for Alireza.
That is some nice maneuvering there. You know, you just reroute the position of your pieces to better square, to greener pastures. That knight, where it came from, had absolutely no jumping spots in the position.
Sir.
You mentioned b4. There's also the idea of knight c6, a5, c4. So 2 very nice spots for the knight to eventually land on. And what Alireza is saying is, I don't care about what's happening on the other flank. If you play f5, you know, the opening up will benefit me. I've got my rook and bishop defending, the queen sliding over. And there we see he continues with the maneuvering game.
Yeah, Hikaru's move given an exclamation mark, not because it gives him any advantage, just it prevents a big threat. The Black Knight was jumping forward to b4. Here, Hikaru wants to prevent your other plan there, Tanya, of the Black Knight jumping by bringing his knight to d2. First, some pawn pushes look very innocuous there, but actually quite committal long term now. The Black King slightly less safe due to that pawn push, but the White King maybe easier to break through to it.
I want to point out one spot which, you know, is easy to miss out. That H-pawn, which has been a strength, is something that can come under fire.
Yeah.
With all of Hikaru's forces on the left side of the board. And look at that. I think Alireza's heading towards the move. Queen E8, Queen H5. Start putting pressure on that pawn because guess what? Hikaru's placed too many pieces on the other flank.
I was wondering about that as well, because as soon as I saw that, I went, H5 looks weak. So does E6. Is White going to play Queen G6 is what I was wondering. And it feels like both players saw the light square weaknesses maybe at the same time. And you obviously can't push the F-pawn or take because you've got Queen takes E6 with check. So we're now consolidating on the light squares for both the white and the black pieces.
Yeah, and that was a hole presented to the White Queen. She jumped in, attacking some pawns. Now, you've got to be a bit careful with Hikaru Nakamura. The White Queen doesn't have too many escape squares, especially if Black gets the time to push the pawn to F5. There's no way back after that. The Black Knight is within a couple of moves of kicking that White Queen out. So this looks like a very, very nice maneuver from Alireza Firouzja. Problem for Hikaru is no teamwork here, no coordination. White's queen is flying solo. And for now, it does feel like Hikaru maybe losing the thread slightly. Maybe a bit overextended here with the white pieces.
And it's really fascinating how Alireza sort of played in his own camp, you know, the queen coming back, queen placing to d7, but all of it comes with this big idea. f5 is actually a huge threat to trap that white queen. And guess what? If you came back from where you came, yes, Alireza will have the option to perhaps repeat, but he could anyway go f5, you know, take away that outpost from the white queen and then target the h5 pawn. He's down on the clock, but he's slowly getting up on the position, and I think Alireza realizes that.
Yeah, time difference at some point was almost 4 minutes. Now it's down to around the 2-minute mark. Hikaru has slowed down, realizing it's not so easy. Retreating the white queen, probably a necessity, there we go, in the next couple of moves at least, and feels like a loss of time. The black queen now can slide across back to the e8 square that it wanted to use in the first place and go for that lonely white h-pawn.
I've got a question to both of you on this position now. Oh, well, hang on a second. The queen's potentially being swapped off. Do we want to resolve the tension for white or for black with the pawns on f6 and e5? Do we actually want to take that off?
Possibly, but maybe you want to wait so your opponent does it on your terms. In the meantime, fascinating moment. A repetition is in the air.
Oh, wow. Okay. We are going to Armageddon, ladies and gentlemen. This was an entertaining, a very interesting fight, a very cerebral fight between these Team Falcons teammates, but it is a second draw in a row, and that means we are going to see Armageddon, I think, for the first time on this stream today. So both players will be bidding for time. The player with the lower number, we will get as the black pieces, and at the end of that, if the black pieces draw, that counts as a victory.
I love it. Two of the fastest players on the planet going into an Armageddon, but for me, slightly surprising that Alireza decided so quickly to take it to that repetition. Just felt that there's maybe something more to fight for, maybe something more to play for, but perhaps it was the clock, and we saw a very high accuracy there, 97% to Hikaru, 98% to Alireza Firouzja, but perhaps Hikaru, the more relieved one.
Now, two high-quality games cancelling each other out. Ultimately, Hikaru was slightly faster in both, so maybe that bodes well. Maybe that gives him some confidence for the Armageddon. But either way, these two Falcons, it will be decided in this next game.
All right, well, Armageddon it is. The players are getting ready to bid for time. It all comes down to one game. Draw, no longer possible because that will be a win for the player with the black pieces. The players are now getting ready to submit their bids to the referees. We're going to a quick break. When we come back, we find out which of the Team Falcons players make it to the quarterfinals.
Reach your impossible, Lenovo Legion.
Welcome to the most exciting format in chess, Armageddon, the ultimate tiebreaker. Armageddon grants white more time on the clock, but in return, white must win. A draw secures black the match point. White will start with 10 minutes. Each player submits a confidential bid with the amount of time that they are willing to play with to take black and get those coveted draw odds. The lowest bid gets to choose their color, usually black, and plays with the amount of time that they bid. The opponent gets the full 10 minutes. Let the Armageddon commence.
Welcome back to chess at the Esports World Cup. It's the end of the day, but we are not ready to go just yet. We've got Armageddon between the Team Falcons teammates. Nakamura and Firouzja are now going to be playing an Armageddon game to determine who qualifies for the quarterfinals. First of all, we have this process. The players will bid for how much time, and the lowest bid wins. But the reason you want to bid for lower time is because you play black with your bid on the clock against your opponent who has 10 minutes with white. You're thinking to yourself, well, hang on a second. Doesn't that mean I have a much bigger chance to lose the game? Yes, you do. You have less time, but you have one massive benefit. A draw results in a win for black. So let's take a look at what times the players bid and who is going to be playing with what. 6 minutes, 48 seconds is the bid from Alireza Firouzja, who will be playing black in this Armageddon game. So Hikaru Nakamura with 10 minutes, Alireza Firouzja with 6:48. A draw is a win for Firouzja. This is exciting.
And that is a very brave bid from Alireza Firouzja. Coincidentally, he only won the bid by 10 seconds. Hikaru Nakamura bid 6:58. But that's time difference now, over 3 minutes advantage that he'll start with. Hikaru, he'll be trying to put pressure on the board and the clock. Firouzja, will that courage pay off?
6:48, dangerously low. But the fact that Hikaru went only 10 seconds higher than that, perhaps these two just know each other so incredibly well. And I have to say, what a way to end day one for chess at the Esports World Cup. You know, we get these two speed demons going down to the wire. It's the Armageddon, it's the final game. This is exciting stuff.
This is in murky water territory. We have been saying, a lot of people have been saying for some time, these two are speed demons, but if push came to shove, maybe Firouzja's just a little bit faster. But is he 3 minutes and 12 seconds faster in a 10-minute game? That's a lot.
That's a lot, and already Hikaru landing the first surprise. There's been a knight for bishop trade. This is a king's pawn opening, but slightly offbeat. No clear path forward for black, and Firouzja's been eating away at his clock already. Spent 20 seconds. Hikaru had only spent 5 seconds up until this move. It does feel like Hikaru, with the white pieces, has come up with a great opening strategy, but he needs to apply that pressure, keep it up. I think we'll find an answer as to who is the most in-form player today.
If we have the version of Hikaru that plays 20 or 30 moves by the time he's gone 1 minute on the clock, I mean, bringing that version of Hikaru out now when your opponent's already over 3 minutes down, that's got to be the play, right?
And that's a big move by Hikaru, you know, just opening up the position. It was a question mark, but I think practically really smart. Alireza forced him to think just a little bit more right now, and Hikaru pauses before he picks up that pawn. There are some exciting, tempting options for white. You could develop your knight, you could push the e-pawn forward, hitting the black knight, or will he go for bishop takes pawn here? David Hikaru, he takes a pause after that first f4.
There was a big shake of the head as well from Hikaru. He kind of shook his head, closed his eyes, being like, why did I do that? He accelerated the play. That means he's gone a bit more direct, and that helps Firouzja. Now it's clearer what black's plan is. Black is going to castle. Black is going to blow open the center with a pawn push to d5. I think Hikaru, Armageddon strategy, maybe he should have been keeping the tension, and there we go. He sits back again. A quick shake of the head, and he's trying to reset because he knows suddenly things are speeding up. and it's not easy for white to find moves.
So let's explain that for the viewers at home. If we engineer any sort of situation where Alireza Firouzja basically has a clear strategy, and you can almost pre-move your next 5 to 10 developing moves or spend very, very little time thinking about them, there's a chance that negates a lot of the advantage Hikaru Nakamura had by starting with 10 minutes on his clock, and a draw would be disastrous because that counts as a loss for Hikaru.
Exactly, and just by nature, in a must-win scenario, you need to invest a bit more time. You need to just eliminate the moves, the variations that might lead towards a draw. And with the time advantage disappearing, now down to only 2 minutes, Hikaru might be regretting that last move here, Firouzja. He's going to get the Black King castled, and then he's going to pounce with pawn to d5.
It feels like he rushed with that, right? Especially with the long thing that just came after that pawn move, developing the knight. Now, the big Armageddon strategy at the top levels often been, take those big decisions, the critical pawn trades, much later on when you've got your opponent down to those final few minutes, becomes that much more difficult to deal with. And Hikaru, another question mark on the board, pushes that e-pawn forward, trying to keep things close, trying to keep things complicated. But look at that, Alireza doing Alireza thing. He doesn't care about his knight. He's coming for Hikaru's knight, which is pinned to the white king.
Look, they're doing one thing. They're keeping it complicated. That much is for sure. But I'm not sure in whose favor. If they end up swapping here, there's an absolutely horrible discovered check that Hikaru Nakamura could be walking into here, whereas once the black knight is captured, a simple recapture with the queen or similar gets you out of trouble. That extra tempo here could prove crucial for Alireza Firouzja.
Disaster. These last 3 moves for Hikaru Nakamura have been so bad for his position. Quick action replay. It looked like on the last move, the white pawn stepping forward was hitting the black knight. Instead of running away, though, counterattack on this white knight, pinned, and that discovered attack that John was mentioning here. If the white pieces continue to grab the material on offer at the very end, you take a pawn, hitting the white king, a check, and next move, the black queen, the new queen, actually defends this rook in the corner. This is the key detail Hikaru might have missed. You can make a queen with a check, the black queen swoops back. Instead, this variation, unthinkable. Hikaru was forced to defend his own knight. We see knights jumping, the black knight hitting the white queen, and wow, this game is progressing so speedily, but black is a couple of pawns up. Let's go back to the game. Hikaru is in hustle mode now.
Couple of pawns up and a beautiful spot for that black knight on e3 planted. It's never getting out of there. This is looking absolutely stunning. You could even just get your king to safety, defend that g7 pawn, which has just been attacked by Hikaru Nakamura. I don't know if you guys saw, but Hikaru's expressions gave it all away. He's frustrated with the way he's handled this Armageddon out of the opening, just giving Alireza a bunch of force moves. Not just that, lands himself in trouble. It might be the white king that's about to face fire.
Yeah, I like the idea of the queen out to b4. You're threatening, well, you're sort of threatening the pawn on b7. You're also preventing castling. You want to keep the black king in the middle of the board, keep those threats alive. The problem is there are more black pieces surrounding white's king than there are white pieces right now. This is so unusual and so dangerous to look at that I just don't think this level of compensation is enough.
Yeah, we saw what happened to a king entering the middle earlier, and the white king now looking precariously placed. Hikaru trying to fight back. He's won one of the pawns back. He's still just 1 pawn down, but a question mark given to this last move from Alireza Firouzja.
And it's Hikaru's king that's on f3, pinning that knight on e4. Very surprising. Again, a very natural move by Alireza, getting the king to safety to the other flank. But let's remind everyone, for Hikaru, a draw is not good enough. So queen trades, Alireza would be super happy to get into the endgame. And we saw that. Hikaru was heading for that queen to c5. He put it right back on his screen.
Yep, that is the only move to stay in the game. According to our computers, the white queen stepping forward to c5, offering a trade. But that only fights for a draw, really. Queen trades, the white pawns might start dropping as well. He does play it out of necessity. If you didn't play this move, the white king would have been in the crossfires. And he's going to try and seek his chances in an endgame. The problem is 4 minutes for Firouzja, when Firouzja is a pawn up and in full control, should still be enough when a draw is sufficient.
Declining the queen trade there. And just take a look at that absolutely monster knight on e3. You take that knight off with any piece for any reason, you got a protected pass pawn for the black pieces as well. This is such an amazing position.
This is nuts. This is insane what Alireza has done. He's just inviting Hikaru to capture the a7 pawn close to the king. Yes, he's eyeing a check on the other flank on h3. We're seeing that being played out right now. And Alireza missed it. He did not see that the pawn was hanging. He can't believe it.
Wow, that was a blind spot. He just made a massive assumption, Alireza, that the black queen can jump in with a check, but that's just a one-mover. That's just a one-move trick. The white king will happily step back and run away. Suddenly, the attack is on the black king. Why didn't he trade queens? A draw up his sleeve in an Armageddon, enough for black. He could have traded queens, gone to safety. That was very impractical.
That was Alireza's intuition taking over. You know, something that's his biggest strength can sometimes be your weakness. He wanted to keep the attack going. But again, the practicality of the situation, you have a beautiful knight planted. You have an extra pawn. Get the queens off the board. You need only a draw.
And look, this isn't like a game-losing blunder or by any means. But when they say the hardest game to win is a winning position, that's when you get the most complacent. That's when you start missing these small details, these little things that could have ended up being crushing.
And there's a big threat on the board. Queen A8 check. Knight coming in with the check would fork the black king and queen. Alireza going into a think after giving up a key pawn is bad news.
Yeah, it might not be a game-losing blunder, but it's definitely a momentum-losing blunder.
For
now
sure.
It's all about white's threats. The black pieces here just lacking the coordination to deliver a killer blow themselves. It does feel like the path is narrowing. He finds a good move there, Alireza, stopping the white knight from leaping forward to c5. But this is, again, just the beginning. Suddenly the clock is all important.
And that's the problem, right? You keep the queens on the board. Hikaru's got another 100 moves that he can play right now. Get those queens traded, you're in an endgame. You're in sort of safer territory right now. Under 3 minutes, and Alireza cannot stop shaking his head.
Yeah, the emotion for Firouzja, that you can see it. You see it in his body language. You see it in the way he's shaking his head. He's thinking, you know what? This is going to be big. This is going to be bold. I'm not going to swap queens. I'm going to win this game. And then a couple of moves later, he is... the amount of regret making that, but you have to move past that. I find this impossible to do over a chessboard. If you realize you've made a mistake, moving past that mistake while you're still playing the same game, in my opinion, is one of the hardest things you can do in chess. It is so difficult to do.
So difficult. And Firouzja, the one thing that might have held him back in his chess career is that inability to shift gears. He's always going for checkmate. He never wants endgames. He's all about the attack. But in Armageddon, you need to use the draw up your sleeve with black to bully the opponent. That queen trade that he declined might come back to haunt him, but still not easy. This position still so irrational. Queens, kings, everything just up in the air. Who is safer? Material count is level right now, but that might not stay the case for much longer. Hikaru Nakamura now tanking before pushing a pawn forward, avoiding any checks from the black queen. Very slow, subtle move there, but will that change the momentum back to Firouzja's hands now?
Gives the move to black right now, and Firouzja is considering taking that central e5 pawn which is hanging, which will allow white to pick up pawns of their own as well. f7 would be weak, but I love this move by the king. It sort of frees up the rook to come and start chasing the white queen from that a file, getting away from any checks on the board and trying to hide on the other flank on the right side, perhaps marching from e7 to f8.
Now Hikaru looks a bit desperate. I think he missed this one. The white queen suddenly looks a bit offside, needs to get back into the game, but it's not going to be an easy path for her. 4 minutes now and counting for Hikaru.
It's like Hikaru now needs time. The queen on a7 feels a bit offside. The rook on h1 isn't in the game at the moment. Hikaru can do all sorts of great things, but he needs to get his pieces in position, and we have a blunderer.
The white queen is trapped. The black queen is going to save itself with a check. The next move, the black rook is going to slide into the corner. The white king suddenly is hit as well. That is a crazy decision by Hikaru Nakamura. He's blown it in one move.
He sees it. Under pressure, he was looking for the way through, and unfortunately, it's backfired in spectacular fashion. The next move, the rook slides across, and Hikaru's now facing down the prospect of losing his queen.
And you could even pick up the rook on h1 and wrap up matters right now. Rook 8, go for the queen, go for the rook, and there's frustration on Hikaru. He got that chance, he got that opportunity with Alireza 2 minutes on the clock, and there was a huge gift at such a critical moment.
Free rook. Forget the queen at this point. Like, the queen would be a trade. The rook is free on h1. Options abound. It looks like rook a8 is the decision made. And compared to queen takes h1, I'm guessing that's the reason we have the X against that move. But that still looks pretty darn strong for black.
Yeah, he just didn't want to calculate there, Firouzja. He wanted to be practical. Queen takes rook on h1 would have allowed some nasty checks, some scary checks. Here we're going to see a queen trade. Slightly convoluted. The black queen gives itself up for one rook. And there we go, the White Queen drops off too, but the White Knight is actually trapped in the corner. Cannot have saved itself, but it would have been pinned. Black has an extra knight. Firouzja now, with just under 2 minutes, is a huge favorite to take this game.
But what happens? Is he going to play this on? Will Hikaru try to flag? 1 minute 45 is quite a bit of time. And look at that. Firouzja up a piece. He's happy with the repetition. A draw is as good as a win. Keeps everything under control. Makes those small moves on his mouse, right? Doesn't want to lose out on time. And Hikaru, he's got any entering squares. He's trying to flag Firouzja.
He's playing a lot more. It's almost like not swapping the queens and risking the game there. Shocked Firouzja into going, oh yes, I need to change gears here. And you can see him playing significantly more practical chess at this point, realizing that he can bully his opponent with the use of the Armageddon rules, like you said, David. And this is far, far more practical than we saw even minutes ago.
Yeah, and in the meantime, Firouzja has been very slow the last few moves. He's trying to checkmate the White King, but this last pawn check has liberated a square for the White King to step up and into on e5. Firouzja thought he was winning on the spot, thought he could end it there and then, but it's not over yet.
He has to make a move. He's just taking so long to play, and that's what Hikaru's done now. He's created some escape squares for the king. The game does go on. Hikaru has a bunch of pawns, 3 extra pawns for that knight. Firouzja desperately trying to repeat the position.
Hikaru can't repeat. He's got to push his king to a different square, maybe retreat it. And yes, it's not objectively correct, but it's all about the clock. His last chance, 1 minute. This is touch and go. This is still anyone's game if Hikaru can induce a blunder or catch Firouzja in a tricky pre-move.
But I look at him and it's almost a feeling, is Hikaru about to throw in the towel? Is he about to resign? He does continue with the repetition, now changes his mind. Game on.
He had to try something. This isn't ideal. The White King now slightly offside, misplaced, and the Black Rook is going pawn hunting. The Black Knight is going to hold the other half of the board. This is a clearly winning position for Alireza Firouzja, but does he have enough time under the 1 minute mark now?
Gives a check, forcing a decision with the king, gets his own king. Look at the speed with which Hikaru is playing, just making sure that Alireza gets no time to think on Hikaru's clock there. Gives a check, comes back with the rook. Alireza trying to keep his pieces close, making those short moves.
Ooh, and Hikaru's pawns are getting very far forward. Alireza might be getting nervous. 45 seconds this time. The White Rook pinning the Black Knight. Hikaru can force a draw, but again, it's not enough. And a big mistake there. The Black Knight is coming around. It's going to be checkmate. The White King is mated. There was Knight A6 check and a mate.
That was a checkmate in 2, which was missed, but there is 37 seconds on the clock, and this is once again flagging territory. What a huge opportunity there. Firouzja had to book his spot. And once again, the fight is on.
Fight is on. It's all about the clock. Hikaru still has some time in the bank. It might make sense to slow down, wait for 10 seconds, and then try and trick Firouzja, but here the position repeating itself. Hikaru cannot let that happen. Under 30 seconds now, but still the rook's on the board. Still tricky for Firouzja.
Gives a check, comes back, and as long as the rooks are alive, the game goes on. And there we've got Firouzja trying to repeat at every single opportunity. The knight
to make progress though.
Coming in. More checkmating patterns. He doesn't even want to try.
Here we go. Firouzja just wants the draw, but he's dropped a pawn, and he gets the White Rook off the board. So sneaky from Firouzja. That is going to end the game. It's going to be a draw now, guaranteed.
And there is the draw that clinches it with 20 seconds left to go on the clock. Alireza Firouzja will take the Armageddon game and move on to the quarterfinals here at the Esports World Cup. Hikaru Nakamura drops to the lower bracket match within the group. He still has the possibility of joining Firouzja in the quarterfinals, but he's going to have to do it the long way.
The second sign-up by Team Falcons is the first to qualify for the quarterfinals, and what an Armageddon it was. It almost felt like it was slipping out of Alireza's hands, and then eventually that one big blunder, the pressure piling on the seconds. But this is why Alireza is a bullet monster. I see nerves there, but you could still feel the tension.
Yeah, they both really wanted that game. They were both super nervous. That's the only reason